Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Boston Club's 2021 Corporate Salute. My name is Lisa DeCubelis, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Amica Insurance. I also serve as co-chair of the Boston Club's Corporate Board Committee. So this morning's event is particularly special for me. You'll hear more today about the Corporate Board Committee's work to increase gender diversity on public and private company boards, an initiative that dates back to the earliest days of the Boston Club. Amica is proud to be the premier sponsor of this year's event. The work of the Boston Club to advance women into leadership roles, as well as the work of Indra Nooyi, our keynote speaker, to improve businesses and communities by strengthening families, resonates with Amica's values. As one of over 2,300 women working for Amica across the United States, I can attest that our support for diversity, for families, and for good governance makes us a fitting partner for the Corporate Salute. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the event.
Good morning. I am Nancy Nager, President of the Boston Club, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our 25th Annual Corporate Salute. Thank you for being here this morning as we come together to recognize the importance of diverse boards and diverse executive suites in public companies. This is the Boston Club's 45th anniversary year, and advancing women's leadership in the corporate sector, as well as in all other sectors, has been a keystone of our existence and a driver of our growth since the beginning. As a volunteer organization, we are fortunate to have members committed to being a force for change and to sharing the work of the Boston Club with all of you, even when that means still doing it virtually. I would like to thank the members of the club who have worked so hard on today's event and given us an opportunity to consider together the ways that leadership has had to change during this past year. To the Corporate Salute Committee members, led by Renee Nylands and Danielle Lucier, I offer many thanks from all of us. Our corporate sponsors and partners also made this event possible. Thank you so much to all of them. As you logged in today, you saw their logos and names, and when we close today's session, I hope you will stay online long enough to review that list again. Every nonprofit looks to develop strong, lasting relationships with its partners and sponsors. The Boston Club is proud to have worked with more than 200 local, regional, and national organizations and individuals over our 45-year history. But especially in this anniversary year, and given the economic constraints of the last 20 months, we want to express our sincere appreciation to those that are supporting today's event. These are organizations and individuals that are proponents of good governance, diverse and inclusive leadership, and a successful economic future for us all. Support them, please, as they have supported our mission today, and join me in thanking all of them. I would like to particularly acknowledge our premier sponsor, Amica, whose generosity extends to making it possible for each of you attending today to receive a copy of our keynote speaker, Indra Nooyi's memoir, My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future. I know we all look forward to reading her memoir. Our presenting sponsor, Raytheon Technologies, and our patron sponsors, Hologic, Progress Software, and the TJX companies are not only leaders in their industry sectors, but they are also excellent examples of companies that recognize the value of diverse leadership. Special thanks, too, to our mentor sponsors, American Tower Corporation, Biogen, the Boston Foundation, Cummings Properties, Eastern Bank, EOS Foundation, EY, iRobot, Liberty Mutual, Servier Pharmaceuticals, Sheehan Finney, and State Street Corporation. This morning, you will hear about the ongoing work of the Boston Club's Corporate Board Committee and the encouraging results of this year's corporate census, highlighting those companies that recognize the value women bring to the boardroom and executive suite. And I know you are as excited as I am to hear Indra Nooyi and Boston's own Shirley Leung discuss Indra's life and how her experiences have shaped her view of what leadership is, what it can do, and what it should be in the future. And we have a terrific special guest and longtime friend of the Boston Club to introduce Indra to you, but you'll have to wait to see who that is. During Indra and Shirley's conversation, we invite you to share any questions you may have for them. Chat will be turned off, but you may use the question and answer feature to tell us what you would like to know. But before all that, we want to welcome someone who has, during the pandemic and before, embodied strong, thoughtful, and compassionate leadership, someone whose longtime support of the Boston Club makes us proud, and someone who needs no introduction. Thank you again for coming. We hope to see you online or in person again soon.
So good morning, everybody. This is Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. I'm honored to join you once again this year, virtually, to celebrate the Boston Club and the important work this organization does on behalf of women in business, nonprofits, government, and beyond. This event's an opportunity to celebrate the work of this organization and so many players in the business community to increase gender diversity on corporate boards and top positions here in the Commonwealth. I've known a lot about the Boston Club. I served on their corporate advisory group. I chaired it at one point when I was at Harvard Pilgrim, and I found a whole bunch of our board members when I was at Harvard Pilgrim from my experience and my work with the club. It's a great organization. It represents an incredibly important part of our community here in Boston and across greater Boston and the Commonwealth. And they do very good work. And for me, the opportunity to spend a few minutes expressing my appreciation for all you do, even if it's virtually, means a lot. And I really do hope at some point I have a chance to come back and see you all in person. I think we all know the last 18 months have presented significant challenges for all of us, just across every single part of our daily life and our work life. And that's why our administration commissioned a Future of Work report to support and guide Massachusetts forward into whatever this new world of work ends up looking like. I believe we're well positioned as we emerge from the pandemic and look to promote economic growth, and that Future of Work report provides us with a roadmap of sorts to build on our strengths and address the areas that continue to be challenging. We're working to respond to the report's findings by pursuing significant investments in housing, skill building and job training, and downtown development, as well as a big piece of environmental infrastructure investment. And our plan is to invest about $2.9 billion of the federal funds that were made available into these areas. We also think we need to make investments and use other tools to provide more flexibility for residents in childcare and transportation. And we look forward to continuing to partner with workers, businesses, communities, and organizations like the Boston Club and its membership to respond to the needs that are raised in the report. In addition, COVID-19 has shown us definitively that those in positions of leadership throughout business, healthcare, government, and beyond must be responsive, accessible, and resilient as they navigate obstacles like a pandemic. The steadfast leadership on display by the Boston Club and its members is exactly the kind of leadership that made all the difference for the Commonwealth as we battle COVID-19 and work on our ongoing recovery. The current work of the Boston Club reflects that critical need for effective and reliable leadership, and I'm super grateful to its leaders and its membership for help in steering the Commonwealth forward. I want to congratulate the Boston Club on yet another incredible corporate salute, and I want to congratulate all those that are being honored this morning. But most of all, I hope all of you have a chance to enjoy the rest of 2021 and that we can all look forward to a much better and brighter and possibly and hopefully safer 2022. Have a great day.
Thanks so much to the governor, and we plan to hold him to that comment about being with us again when our next salute is held in person. The Boston Club represents around 600 women from the Commonwealth and beyond who believe in the power of women. We recognize that women from all experiences have successfully started, run, and grown businesses of all kinds. The new virtual environment requires us all to give even greater notice to how we continue to create new relationships and celebrate the power of women and diversity. This year, we are proud to be celebrating a woman of color business leader with our inaugural Women in Business Racial Equity Award. And our first award goes to a woman who founded and has developed a successful business enterprise that demonstrably develops sponsorship of people through access to jobs, mentorship, and community support. The Boston Club believes that her commitment to diversity and to women is worthy of our recognition and yours. Please join me in congratulating Donna Latson-Gittins, founder of More Advertising. And while I would much prefer to be welcoming Donna onto a stage, giving her a hug and thanking her in person, that will have to wait. In the meantime, we've asked Donna to share her thoughts about the award with you. Donna?
Thank you all. I'm humbled and honored to be the first recipient of the Boston Club's Women in Business Racial Equity Award. Thank you especially to the award committee and my colleagues who nominated me for this honor. Joanne Hilferty, Juliet Mayers, Mary Reed, Maureen Alphonse Charles, John Regan, and my business partner, Judy Haber. The Boston Club has dedicated itself to elevating women executives for many years. And yet the horrific loss of George Floyd in Minnesota and so many other Black citizens across our country has galvanized us all, shining a light on the stark inequities facing people of color nationally and locally. This moment is no doubt an opportunity, but we cannot afford to address structural racism only when the floodlight of a crisis illuminates it. Committing our national journey toward equity requires that we come together as a community to acknowledge the divide in our city, grapple with our own individual biases and beliefs, and create a consensus on the way forward for policy development and action. Not just once, unceasingly. Not only now, always. We can only succeed if we learn how to build relationships with each other based on sincere regard, deeper understanding, and real trust. We must create models of what we want to see in every dimension of our society. I believe that is the best way to create change and bring us closer to racial equity and true justice. Thank you again for this remarkable honor. Let's get to work together.
Congratulations again, Donna, and thank you for all you do to create a better community for all of us. And because we recognize that everyone needs support, needs allies, and that people of color often lack the support that others receive and that is needed to sustain the businesses they create, the Boston Club is also proud to recognize a woman ally. The inaugural Women in Business Racial Equity Ally Award has been presented to Julie Crockford. As the leader of Empower Success Corps, Julie has a terrific nonprofit that develops sponsorship of people through access to jobs, mentorship, and community support. Julie is truly an ally to women and people of color. Please join me in congratulating Julie, again, virtually. And here she is to share her thoughts about the award. Julie?
Wow. Thank you, Nancy. Here is the award. I wish we were all together. Wouldn't that be fantastic? There must be 1,000 women more deserving of this award than I. But thank you, Nancy. Thank you, the Boston Club. Thank you, Donna Bonaparte and Stephanie Brown and all the members of the DEI committee. It is a privilege to serve on that committee with you. I also want to thank Maureen Alphonse Charles, who was my sponsor when I joined the committee, or when I joined the Boston Club. And I want to thank Ann Moritz, who works with me on a very regular basis, and a group of white leaders who are trying to be anti-racist. And I want to call out the work of Deborah Plummer. She's a psychologist and an author, and she wrote a book that really speaks to me because it does explain, I think, one of the most important things that we can do as white people if we want to understand the lives of our Black friends. And that is, we really have to have friendships. We really need to cultivate friendships because we walk through the world very differently than Black women do. And if we have actual close friendships where we can confront issues, see how they experience things that we would experience very differently, see how their children experience things that our children would experience very differently, I think we really begin to understand and can be the allies that we want to be and begin to not feel the world so much as a white oppressor, but as an ally, living out our own values. So thank you, Boston Club. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important message from the Boston Club. Before the main part of our agenda gets underway, which I know we're all anxious to do, I'm going to spend just a few short minutes, I promise, addressing a significant event that is taking place at the Boston Club. It is with very mixed emotions that I share with all of you that after 25 years, Constance Armstrong, our executive director, is retiring on November 15th. She joined our community when we were only about 300 members and has since led us through countless changes and growth over the years while expertly managing all of the operations of the club, from the truly sublime to the most trivial. And she has done it with humor and grace. She has been dedicated to ensuring that the Boston Club continues to thrive and achieve its mission of advancing women in their careers. While we still cannot imagine the club without Constance, we are delighted that she will now be able to do all of those things she has thought about, and will get to enjoy some real rest and relaxation. We wish Constance all the best as she embarks into her next adventure. And to commemorate this significant transition, we will be honoring Constance in several ways. First, 14 of Constance's family members are attending this event, unbeknownst to Constance, organized by Marlene Favaloro, our executive assistant, and also by Constance's husband, Jim. We welcome them this morning, and a big thank you to Jim for walking the Boston Club path all these years. And even though Constance is leaving her leadership role, we won't be losing her engagement. Constance will be receiving a complimentary lifetime membership to the club. I'm also very excited to announce that the annual Boston Club President's Award will now be permanently named the Constance Armstrong Award, and we will be asking Constance to give the first Constance Armstrong Award at the annual meeting this June. Finally, I will be personally delivering to Constance a crystal flora and fauna vase from Tiffany's representing her love of gardening with the following inscription: "With deepest appreciation and gratitude for your tremendous stewardship of the Boston Club and for your steadfast commitment to our mission of advancing women leaders. You have suffered us gladly. Thank you, Constance, from all of us at the Boston Club." And now let's give Constance a round of applause. And now, on to our main event.
Good morning. I'm Toni Wolfman, a longtime member and past chair of the Corporate Board Committee. Since its inception in 2003, I've been a co-author of the Boston Club's Census of Women Directors and Executive Officers of Massachusetts' largest public companies. Over the past 19 years, it has been my pleasure to work with Professor Patricia Flynn of Bentley University and Constance Armstrong of the Boston Club on this annual report. We were joined 2 years ago by Pat's Bentley colleague, Professor Cynthia Clark, and this year, recent Bentley grad Jack Lindberg also assisted us. The title of this year's census, Breaking Barriers, is very fitting to today's program, and I offer my personal congratulations to the recipients of the Boston Club's first Women in Business Racial Equity Awards. As you will see, the subject of racial equity is reflected throughout our report. Before I give you the highlights of the census, I want to add my thanks to the sponsors of this year's salute. Many of them are among the 100 largest public companies in Massachusetts, the subject of our report, and are leaders in diversifying their boards and executive suites. When you receive a PDF of the census, take a look at the appendices to see what I'm talking about. And although it is not in our census, because it is based in Rhode Island and is not a public company, our premier sponsor, Amica Insurance, is itself a model of leadership diversity. 5 of its directors and 4 of its top executives are women, and there are several people of color in each of those groups. Thank you to Amica and our other sponsors for your leadership in this effort. And now to the results of the 2021 census. As you will see from this slide, the steady, but perhaps too slow progress towards gender parity has continued this year, with record numbers and percentages of women on the boards, in the executive suites, and among the top paid executives of the 100 largest public companies in Massachusetts. There also has been a significant increase in the number and percentage of women of color who are directors and executive officers of these companies. The identity of all of these women is provided in the appendices to the census. Furthermore, nearly half of all census companies have at least 3 women directors, an increase of 8 from last year, and 17 of them have 4 or more women on their boards. Several census companies have multiple women of color on their boards or in their executive suites, and 10 companies each has at least 3 women directors and at least 3 women executive officers. The names of all of these companies can be found in the report. But to us, the biggest news of this past year is the high rate at which men and women of color have joined the boards of census companies. Although we have been identifying women of color for many years, this year we decided to also take a look at the men of color who serve on census company boards. The result of that work appears as a special analysis in the report. We looked particularly at the process of board turnover at the 88 census companies that were in our 2020 report, as well as in this year's report. As this chart shows, more than 50% of the new directors added to those 88 company boards during the past year are people of color. Further breaking these figures down, we find that nearly 60% of all new independent directors, those who are not company executives or major shareholders, are people of color. It is by maintaining a high rate at which women and people of color join the boards of census companies that the overall percentages held by these groups will increase. For example, the addition of the new directors of color to those who already held seats in the 88 companies increased their overall representation by 50%. Looking now at all 100 companies, as shown in this chart, we see that 67 census companies currently have at least 1 woman and at least 1 person of color on their boards. While we do not have 2020 comparative data, we know from our turnover analysis of the 88 companies that several of them added their first director of color this year. On the other hand, a third of the census companies still have all-white boards, and 2 of those companies have no diversity whatsoever. Contrary to last year, when we celebrated the fact that every census company had at least 1 woman director, 2 of the 12 companies that joined the census this year apparently haven't gotten the message. One way of getting the message out is to mandate clear and comprehensive disclosure of board demographics. In the concluding section of our report, we note the increasing use of board matrices, with the inclusion of diversity factors built into the matrix often used to show the skills and experience of board nominees. And we offer a model for companies to adapt to their specific needs. We know from our turnover analysis that many opportunities exist for the addition of more women and people of color going forward. And we hope that our suggestions, as well as our continuing tracking of this information, will result in further progress in breaking down barriers. And now to 2 people who have been breaking barriers. Most of you know Shirley Leung, and if she is not already your favorite Boston Globe columnist, I bet she will be by the end of today's program. In the course of her career in journalism, Shirley has covered the gamut, from reporter to editor to opinion writer. In her current incarnation at the Globe, Shirley focuses broadly on the world of business, but she does not hesitate to take on political issues and other topics of timely interest. Shirley does her research and she pushes hard for answers. Shirley also is a great friend of the Boston Club and has moderated panels and interviewed feature speakers for us many times in the past. We are grateful to Shirley for giving us her time and energy today. In one of the rare times that my professional life and avocational interests have lined up perfectly, sometime in 1998, the Corporate Board Committee was contacted by the Timberland Company for assistance in recruiting some stellar women for its board of directors. Jeffrey Swartz, then Timberland CEO, had identified 2 women whom he and his board felt would add tremendous value: Virginia Kent, then Chief Marketing Officer of Hasbro, and Indra Nooyi, then CFO of Pepsico. As luck would have it, both Hasbro and PepsiCo were clients of Foley, Hoag and Elliott, of which I was a partner. And for many years, I had worked with lawyers at PepsiCo and the Pepsi Bottling Group on several litigation matters. So I picked up the phone to call my colleagues in purchase, and they facilitated the introduction of Jeff to Indra. The courtship that followed was the subject of a feature article in the Globe showing Indra, Ginger, and Jeff next to a giant Timberland boot. Jeff subsequently joined the Boston Club's corporate advisory board and was a great cheerleader for our efforts. I am so pleased that we were able to track Jeff down in Israel and that he agreed to make the following introduction.
In Springsteen's poetic voice, I acknowledge to the Boston Club, I got debts no honest man can pay. In the late 90s, you helped transform our business. build our organization, strengthen our community by introducing to our board leaders of purpose and power, leaders who helped govern our dreams and our ambitions. The leaders you introduced us to in our boardroom changed us for the better. I thank you. None of those, though, more than Indra Nooyi. From Indra, I learned much of substance. She is, of course, the most powerful and experienced leader in the room always, but it was, and it is, her derech, which is a Hebrew word that speaks more about how you lead than what you do, that inspired me then and pushes me now. As I read My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future, I remember learning from Indra in the Timberland boardroom, where she taught me that impatience with poorly built plans was about dishonoring time. In the snow at Davos, where she taught me that power shared is change built. In debates, where her ideas are fierce and her approach fearless and her mind brilliant, yet what she taught was not to insist on being right, but to insist on doing right in a measured voice, bracingly authentic, not insisting on speaking, rather challenging me and everyone else in earshot, eye shot, and thought shot to learn how to listen. Indra was and is the personification of the just warrior. The Mahabharata, a Sanskrit epic poem dating some 2,000 years, is the first written treatment of a just war. Cousins there debate how to wage war and yet remain righteous. Questions of proportionality, just means, just cause, fair treatment of the defeated. This is ancient wisdom, but in Indra's derech, it's wisdom that comes alive as she leads. I watched her listen with patience to the city year presentation in the Timberland boardroom. And then I watched her take what she heard and turn it into transformative energy at Pepsi as city year became a more powerful force for change in American schools. I watched her drive change all through Pepsi in the products that were more healthy and the business practices that were more sustainable, not conventional wisdom, powerful leadership. I watched her live, I watch you live, Indra, the impossible challenge of being a just warrior. Thank you to the Boston Club for insisting on the inclusion of women leaders in our world. Thank you to voices that sing and must be heard on editorial pages, voices that give voice to issues and souls that otherwise folks don't want to listen to. And thanks to you, Indra, thanks to you for the life you dare and the story you continue to write. In your honor here in Jerusalem, I went to retail this week, hard business, and I sacrificed my dignity and I paid retail. And that's not a big problem on its face, but I did it for one reason, because I wanted to be able to tip my hat to you. It kills me, a lifelong Red Sox fan, it kills me. But for you, I tip not just any old cap, I tip this cap to you. I will admit, it is easier after the wild card, but it ain't simple. Neither is life. I look forward to listening to this interview and learning from you now and always.
Hello, my name is Shirley Leung. I'm from the Boston Globe. Indra, it's great to see you. That was quite an introduction from Jeff. And to have a Yankees cap in front of an audience of Red Sox fans.
I tell you, I couldn't recognize myself. Jeff was so generous, and he's always been that way. Jeff is a man with a big heart, a big brain, a brilliant person who cares deeply about humanity. And contrary to what Jeff is saying, I learned more from Timberland and from Jeff and his father than perhaps I contributed. And this Yankees cap was the tip of the iceberg. I mean, such class to put that on. I couldn't put on a Red Sox hat even if I wanted to. So I love the man.
So Indra, thank you so much for joining us this week. And it's such a momentous week in Boston. Just this week, this city elected its first woman, its first person of color, first Asian American as mayor of Boston. That would be Michelle Wu. And it's exciting because our current acting mayor is Kim Janey. Also broke the concrete ceiling as a Black woman. And so the handoff is from a Black woman to an Asian woman. So an incredible time in Boston this week. And I want to congratulate you on your book. Uh, I got my notes on it. It's incredibly candid and instructive for women and our male allies. And thank you to the Boston Club for year after year in breaking the old boys club. So I just want to remind everyone, Indra and I are going to be chatting for about half an hour. We have some topics and issues that we want to go over, but then you in the audience, I think there's like hundreds of you, you can ask questions too. And I think in the middle of your website, there's a Q&A feature, so you can submit questions there. And we have about 10 minutes at the end to go through your questions. So please submit questions. So again, that was quite an introduction from Jeff. And I think Timberland was your first public board, right? And I was wondering, what was your experience like? And did that open doors for you to serve on other boards?
First of all, I have to say thanks to the Boston Club, because they were the ones who, talked to Jeff Schwartz and put me on the board. And that was my first public company board. And I'm going to say it launched me in the boardrooms. And, who knows, maybe that's what got me to be CEO. So I'm going to give Boston Club all the credit. But I must say, the Timberland board was a great experience. I learned a lot. It was a great set of board members. It was a consumer brand. So, for me, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I think more importantly, in the Timberland board, no voices were snuffed out. This wasn't about women feeling less important than the men or whatever. The Schwartz family made sure that everybody was included in the discussion. Every voice was respected. And I think that's the kind of behavior we should see in every boardroom.
So Indra, as you heard earlier, this year's Boston Club Census, women and people of color joined the C-suite and the boards in record numbers. When you took the reins of Pepsi in 2006, you were the first South Asian woman to be named CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I think you were one of about 10 women CEOs on the list. Today, there are about 36 women CEOs among the Fortune 500. Is that progress?
So when I joined PepsiCo in 94, there were no women CEOs. Mm-hmm. In 2006, there were, I think, 10 or 11. Today, there are 41. Mm-hmm. One way you can look and say, wow, there's 41, that's great. From 0 to 41 in 27 years. Yeah, that's progress. On the other hand, it's 8.5% of the Fortune 500 companies that have women CEOs. And to be honest, the company that I ran was still the company with the largest market cap run by a woman. So I think, there's a lot more opportunity for women to rise. There's a lot more opportunities for women to become CEOs. And the World Economic Forum says at this rate, it's going to take us 137 years to have parity with men on CEO jobs. But I don't think that's a good metric. All that we should say is women are incredibly competent. And let's make sure we look at talent through the lens of competence, not through the lens of gender or ethnicity or whatever. And if we did that, I think women will ascend to larger and larger jobs.
Mm-hmm. So, this week I mentioned we just elected our first women mayor in Boston. She's going to start in 2 weeks. Women in this town have waited a long time for a woman to be running City Hall, and winning is one thing, but succeeding is another. And I know Michelle Wu is a woman of color. She's going to face obstacles and opposition that white male mayors have not. And so I was just wondering, what kind of adversity did you face as a woman of color CEO? And how did you manage that? And what lessons would you offer for Michelle Wu?
Oh, it's a great question. I think what she will find, if it's anything like what I went through in 2006, only thing it'll be even more because social media is more active now. People will talk more about her ethnicity and her age and forget the incredible competence that she has. And people might even romanticize her ethnicity and her age. And I put romanticize in quotes. For me, they made it out as if I ran around in a sari and bare feet all the time in the boardroom floor. So, they'll pick up some incident and make it larger than life because they have to give her personality more color than she is. She's just a super competent person. They have to give it some other additional color. I think you should let that play out because it's a 2-week story. Let that play out. I think the next stage is really what you want to deliver. Now, every one of us should be, in social media, whatever, emphasizing Michelle Wu's competence. I read her background. My God, at this young age, to have accomplished as much as she did, managed adversity the way she did, still kept her family together, her responsibility for her mother, her younger sister. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And then after Harvard Law School, I mean, she was class valedictorian, Harvard College, Harvard Law School. Those are not simple credentials. She is just wicked smart. But on top of that, she could have gone to a big corporate job and made a ton of money. Instead, what does she do? She goes and puts herself in public service and says, I want to give my time and my energy and my efforts to, helping the city of Boston. So I look at people like Michelle Wu and say, let us not pigeonhole them into some identity or age background. Let's just say, wow, we have an incredibly talented person that's going to be running this city. Why not give her some tailwinds? Why not give her our support? After all, we want the city to be incredibly successful. So let's put politics and our other labeling aside, and let's just focus on her talent and help her get to her objectives. I think all of us have to help, men and women have got to help her.
Mm-hmm. So your book, which I loved, I think everyone's getting a copy and will read it. And so in your book, you often write about the tension between family and work. And one anecdote sticks out in my mind. This is when your mother admonishes you by telling you, quote, leave that crown in the garage. Tell us about that incident and what you learned from it.
Well, I was coming back from a late night to break the big news. I was made president and member of the board. And my mother didn't want to hear any of that because she said, the house needs milk, go get the milk. And I was very upset with her because I thought she should let me celebrate my moment of glory and fame. But her point was, when you enter this house, you are the wife and the mother and the daughter and the daughter-in-law. Nobody else can take your place. And so don't bother telling me about the fact you're now president or on the board. I don't know what it means. I don't care. I only know that you have a different role to play. Now, at that time, I might have been upset, Shirley, but in retrospect, I realized that my mother was teaching me about power and humility. That first of all, I think by extrapolation, she was saying that both husband and wife should leave their crown in the garage and leave their power behind and come home and realize you have a very different role to play. That people at home don't work for you, they're all members of the same family. And you have a very different set of responsibilities at home that are more lasting and long-term than a job that might come and go. And second thing she was saying was that it doesn't matter how senior you are in your job. Ultimately, you're going to be defined by the kind of kids you've left behind. For me, if you have children. And so she was basically telling my husband and me, don't forget, the core of your responsibility is family and kids. The rest of it is what you do for self-actualization. It's a tough message to take on because at some point you want to be celebrated. You want to be told how great you are. But an Asian mother never does that. You should know. You should know that.
I should know, yes. You talk to my kids, they'll say the same thing.
My kids say the same thing. Can't you just celebrate us? Nah, we don't. We think you can do better.
So this tension, my kids are 8 and 10, and I that comment for your mom resonated for me because she reminded, those of us who are working mothers or working parents that there's no one to delegate to at home. You're it. You can do that at work.
Right. Exactly.
You're
right.
it. So when you look back, the tension is constant, right, between family and work. Would you have done anything differently?
You know what I would have loved? I would have loved for me to have been CEO now because there's more technologies available. I would have loved to have gone home at 3 or 3:30, taken my kids off the school bus, spend some time with them, got them set up to do homework. And while they were doing homework, I would get back to work through Zoom. We didn't have those technologies then. Even a smartphone was barely emerging. I wouldn't have had to travel so much. I could have done half my travel through Zoom, talking to my teams around the world. If I had the smartphone and could text and FaceTime, I'd be talking to my kids nonstop during the day. So I think that what would I've done differently now that I know what technology can do, I'd have hoped could be accelerated all to the day that I started. So I don't believe my kind of work style and work intensity is needed today because I spend a lot of time away from home when I could have done a lot of that from home. So I could have been physically present. So I would look at the next few years and say technology is going to progress even faster. And for young family builders, men and women, it's an opportunity to leverage technology and for companies to put families at the center of the discussion. So you can think about how to let people have a good family life and contribute to paid work.
I mean, that just segues beautifully. I don't think it was planned, but into my next question. I mean, women have long talked about flexibility at work, and it just took a pandemic, right, for everyone to listen to us and actually do it through Zoom and through working from home. So do you think this hybrid workplace is here to stay, or is it just for the next year or two, and we're all going to go back to being in the office 5 days a week?
So my big piece of advice, Shirley, is that everybody should calm down and not get worked up about any models people are trying. You know, CEOs and company leaders are trying to figure out what's the right model. What does hybrid working mean? What does flexible working mean? Because the work still has to get done. Who should come to work and when? Should they come in work groups? Should everybody come in 2 days of the week or 3 days of the week? Should some teams come in some days, other teams come in another day? Everybody's trying to figure it out. Should people go from home to a co-working space near their home if they want to leave the house? Where should care be located? Should be located close to communities or close to the offices? So I think CEOs are going to try to figure out what's the best pathway forward. So companies are going to be trying lots of experiments in different parts of the company. The thing to watch out for is the following. In knowledge companies, knowledge-based companies, where everybody is an office worker, we can talk about all this. But when you have a manufacturing company where the manufacturing workers have to come to work, everybody who is distributing, who's putting stuff on the shelf has to come to work. What you cannot afford to create is two classes. One group that just rolls out of bed and gets on Zoom, and another has to get up in the morning and go to work. And one group has higher wage potential, the other group does not. So I think we have to be very, very careful, the signaling effect of what we are suggesting. And it cannot happen that manufacturing companies, everybody comes back to work, but in knowledge companies, people work flexibly. So I think that the Business Roundtable, company leaders, with the help of their employees, are going to have to figure out the right structure for how to return to work and what is the future of work itself and how much is technology going to progress that we can have even better conferencing facilities. So I'm actually nervous but happy about the next 2-3 years because I think we're going to see interesting new experiments emerge.
Great. I just remind everyone that to ask questions, you use this Q&A feature on your website, and because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to go through audience questions. So in your quote unquote retirement, you left, it was 2018,
2018 October as CEO and 2019 February as chairman.
Yeah. So in your retirement, you've been focused on what you call your moonshot. Right? Moonshot vision to bring more women into the workforce and help them advance by building out this care infrastructure, from childcare to elder care to paid leave, to even structured career breaks. So I want you to share another story from your book on how paid leave probably changed the course of your career. And you quite possibly might not have been the CEO of Pepsi if not for paid leave.
I may not have had a job, but for paid leave. Very early in my career at Boston Consulting Group, in 1982, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And the doctors told me he only had about 6 months to live because it was pancreatic cancer diagnosed late. And the news was a shock because my father was very, very close to me and I was close to him. And I decided that I was going to leave my job and take care of him until he passed away. My mother, myself, my brother, all of us. And BCG called me and said, we're going to give you 6 months with pay. Take care of your dad. Now, there were only a couple of women in the company, so this wasn't being done for women. And we had no paid leave policy then. But they created a paid leave structure for me. Now, my father died in 3 months, and the day after the 3 months, I went back to work. So I did not abuse the paid leave. But I am a product of the first paid leave. Then when my first child was born, I was given 12 weeks maternity leave. And when I had a car accident in 86, BCG gave me time off to recover and then come back. And so, I have great respect for BCG, a Boston-based consulting group, Boston Consulting Group, that really led the way on paid leave in my life. And in those days, there was not even a return ramp for women. So had I not had that paid leave, I have no idea what my career trajectory would have been. And so I come back and say a lot of the paid leave stuff we put into place in PepsiCo, but I don't know why there's such an emotional debate around paid leave, except to say the following. Small and medium-sized companies probably are struggling with how do we pay for it. If you have a small business with 5 people and somebody needs paid leave, how are they going to manage the company? So I can understand why it's opening up some difficult discussions and conversations about how do we pay for it. So some combination of companies, state governments, federal governments have to come together and say, how do we make this work? Whether it's for maternity leave or taking care of a sick person. But the more important thing, Shirley, is that if paid leave ever passes, we should make sure nobody abuses it. The paid leave should be viewed as an incredible gift that's used very, very judiciously.
That's a good point. I'm seeing that people are asking as loading up the queue for Q&A questions. So
Yeah.
this is great. They're paying attention.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Anyways, I have a few more questions and then we'll jump
Please.
to audience. So politics is the third rail in corporate America, but increasingly politics in this country is so polarizing that CEOs and companies are being asked to take sides. So how should CEOs handle politics? I mean, should they remain on the sidelines or weigh in on something like voting rights or abortion rights?
I've always said that if a CEO weighs in on an issue that's politically charged, okay, 1/3 of the employees love it. In fact, they'd be upset if the CEO did not weigh in. 1/3 of the employees hate it, and another third stay absolutely quiet. So you can either say 2/3 support me or 2/3 are against me. That's the problem. So in many cases, a CEO has to speak on their own. And the guide that you have is your value statement, the corporate values. If something goes against corporate values, articulated corporate values, you can speak up. Otherwise, best to speak up through the business roundtable of the Chamber of Commerce, because then the CEO group together is sending a message to the people in power in politics. But if each CEO gets up and speaks on an issue that's not consistent with their value statement, then you get into a lot of trouble with people, criticizing the CEO, which you don't need, because CEOs today are so busy and so overworked. You don't need more criticism from the outside. It's a very thorny issue, Shelley. It's not easy because there are so many social issues today that you could argue that people are looking for somebody to step up and help them with. But CEOs also have to say, where do you stop?
So you're in your book, you talk a lot about being an immigrant.
Yep.
And that's a big part of your story. When you came here when you were, I think, college, right? Yeah. And
Yale Business School.
Yeah. And so my parents were also immigrants coming here from Hong Kong and Taiwan in 1970. And because, coming to America, living in America, I mean, it's the dream, right?
Yep.
Around the world. But when I look at the America today, I wonder if my parents would make that same choice to settle here. I mean, how do we get our country back to a place where immigrants feel welcome again?
So I'm going to say something that might be surprising to everybody. I would say that if you open the borders of every country around the world, most number of people still come to America. And it's a relative game, it's not an absolute game. On a relative basis, we are still the most open country, the most incredible meritocracy. The opportunities are still there. Are there issues? Yeah, but I would not let 10 or 15% of the population define the goodness of the 85. So I honestly, truly believe if I had to make a decision all over again, I would still choose to come to America. There's a great song by Brooks and Dunn called Only in America. If anybody gets a chance, listen to the song, listen to the lyrics, and take the chorus to heart, because there's so much that's possible only in America. So I think we should celebrate what we have.
Great. So, all right, I have two fun questions for you before
Okay.
we go to the Q&A, and we've got tons of questions. So, what's your favorite Pepsi product?
Two things. One is, there's an orange drink we make overseas called Mirinda Orange. I love Mirinda Orange. It's really delicious, and it's not available in the US, but when I go overseas, I drink large quantities of it. And in the Frito-Lay portfolio, I am a regular consumer of Lay's chips, the kettle cooked Lay's. It's usually sold out because it's such a hot demand, but Lay's kettle cooked is the best kettle cooked chip in the market. There's nothing that comes close.
Kettle chips and Miranda soda. All right.
Mirinda, yep.
Miranda. Okay. And then what product do you wish Pepsi had created? Is there a product that you wish you guys had created?
I always dreamed that the brand Pepsi was so strong and so iconic. Could we make a very healthy product under the brand name of Pepsi?
All right. All right. So maybe you can give some tips to the current CEO. So I'm going to segue into some questions from the audience here.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. I love this question. So how did your early board appointments influence your worldview as well as advance your career?
I think functioning, serving on a public company board, you understand management of a company from a very different perspective. So, I always say the way you do business is zooming in and zooming out. You zoom into ground level and zoom out to about 10 or 15,000 level, and you keep going back and forth. Think strategically, think operationally. But when you're on a board, you're at 25,000 feet because you have a hand on the wheel, but you never put your hands in the pie when you're a board member. And so you learn governance in a whole different way. How do shareholders think? How should a company position itself? How do you develop leaders for succession? So to me, I learned to become a corporate leader of a public company, as opposed to just a leader buried in the organization when I became a board member. So it's a whole different experience. You've got to almost prepare for it. It's not the same as running a division or running a company.
All right.
Because you'll have a tendency to take over the company. Don't do it. That's not your job. There's a whole team running the company. You're only responsible for governing it on behalf of the shareholders.
Got it. So what advice would you have for senior women about mentoring other women moving into a senior C-suite position?
Yeah. Let me just give you some generalized observations about people who mentor. Mentors pick you, you don't pick them. So don't just think that you go to somebody and say, I'd like you to be my mentor, and they're your mentor. They're not. A good mentor picks you. Second point, a mentor is usually very confident. They don't care if their mentee is their boss or rises above them. Mentors love people management. Mentors actually thrive on seeing people develop and emerge into bigger and bigger positions. Mentors are secure. There's no insecurity associated with mentors. Mentors are supporters and promoters, not just mentors. And so I would just say to women, follow these rules. Make sure that as you mentor, be secure. Don't just say, as long as you're junior to me, I'm willing to mentor you. But the minute you reach my level, I'm not going to mentor you because now I'm worried you might take my job. You should mentor people because you're so in awe of their skills and their capabilities, and you think they should go places. And you're going to be viewed as having a say or a piece of their success. If you have those traits, then mentor people. Don't mentor people because somebody asked you to be their mentor.
All right. Another question, looking back, what advice would you give your younger self? This person who's asking the question, she's thinking about her teenage daughters. And what was a watershed moment for you when you look back?
I mean, her teenage daughter today, every morning I say to her, dream big. You know, you can be anything you dream and you want to be. Don't let anything hold you back. And we will be I tell my daughters, I will be the support structure for you. But dream big, soar. If you want to run an NGO, work in an NGO, that's fine. If you want to work as a political organizer, that's fine. If you want to be a corporate executive, that's fine. My only request is this: whatever you do, throw your head, heart, and hands into the job. Don't look at it as a job, look at it as a calling. And if you really put yourself into the whole job, I think it'll be a whole different vantage point that you'll see the job. You look at the job rather than saying, I just got to go to work. You'll say, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to do something purposeful. That's a whole different attitude to go to work with.
All right, so this is a question from your time at Pepsi, and I think you actually talk about this in your book. So the question is, curious to hear Indra's point of view on how, as CEO of Pepsi, you were able to stay close to consumer and market trends. I'm just remembering some of the stories of flying into states and like driving with your colleagues to eat at Taco Bell. And so if you could talk a little bit about your firsthand market research, I guess.
So market tours are critically important. I mean, walking the retail shelves, looking at people who are shopping, looking at what they're putting in their baskets. Now, today, a lot is done online, so it's a different dynamic. But those days, there was no online of our products. And so you could walk a grocery store and talk to shoppers. Shopper intercepts was something very common. We talk to shoppers. We talk to the store managers, what's depleting, what's moving, what's not. Looked a lot at consumer trends, the consumer research. Wherever I went, I would look to see what people are drinking or eating. If you laid out products on the side in a conference, I'd go there and count the facings to see which products were depleting. So you become an observer all the time. Because in a consumer product, you don't have to be like in turbines or big electronic equipment. You're watching it being consumed in front of you. Everybody's a consumer. Your family members are consumers. You hear all of the talk. What are they saying about your products? What are they buying from the store? Are they buying your products or are they buying completely different products? Everything you ask a question. My kids would bring some edgy products and I'd go, why did you buy this product? And they'll say, well, I liked it. So tell me what about this product you liked? Why did it make you pay $2 for this bottle when you could have gotten product X for $1? And they'll explain to me what drew them to that product. I'll store that in my head and say, so people shop differently. So I think you have to become a lifelong student and go deep into the business constantly.
All right. So my next question is a couple questions about being an immigrant. And any advice for immigrant women finding the balance in terms of assimilating versus maintaining expression of identity? How do you strike that right balance?
Many of us immigrants chose to come to America willingly. And there is a culture, there is a way of life here. Now, what I'm going to say is purely my perspective. I'm not prescribing, I'm just giving you my perspective. My perspective is you keep your authenticity, but you also blend in. That's what my parents told me when I left. They said, maintain your identity, but also blend in. Because at the end of the day, you're going there willingly, and it behooves you to blend in. I had the benefit of being educated in English and the family spoke English. So English was not a barrier for us, but in every other way, I blended in. I became a student of American sports. I started to love everything about this place. I started to love food. I'm a vegetarian, but everything local I started to love. I discovered the unique generosity and hard work of the average American who's just one of the hardest working person in the world. So I began to appreciate their values, their way of thinking. And I slowly started to follow some of those in my own life. And so I think I still keep my vegetarianism, my authenticity. I still know I'm of Indian origin. So all of that I keep, but I've also blended in. And I think everybody who's an immigrant who's coming in here should realize that you end up being a little bit of a blended personality. Rather than saying, I'm from country X and I want to maintain my identity all the way. then you should stay in your country. The fact that you came here means that you take the best of what the US has to offer and accept it.
Another question about your culture, and so being Indian, and do you think your culture influences the kind of leader you became?
I think so. I'm a product of my upbringing. I'm a product of my experiences that I went through. I'm a product of the environment in which I grew in. And I think the fact that I grew up in a multi-generational household, where family makes such a huge difference to everything we did, made me more aware about people's families, made me want to thank the families. So I think that I am a product of my upbringing. And I was also told that when I was growing up, be fearless in giving your point of view. If you disagree with somebody, don't hold back. Make sure you make your point known, but do it in a constructive way. And so all of these ideas that were put in my head as a kid came to the fore as I grew up.
So we have a question about boards and getting on a corporate board.
Yeah.
And so it's often seen as a black box, like, how do you do it? So what advice would you give to women who are interested in getting on a board?
First step, ask yourself why you want to be on a board. People think it's sexy to be on a board. Everybody says it gives you added oomph or reputational boost. Before you do anything like that, there's a lot of responsibility being on a board. There's a lot of governance issues you have to understand. So step one, sit down and think hard. Why do I want to be on a board? Is it the fees that keeps coming if you're on a board? Is it something else? And once you decide why you want to be on a board and you're very clear about it, then figure out which industry you want to be on the board of. Don't get on the board of a company where you know nothing about the industry and then you can't contribute. Get on the board, especially your first board should be an industry that you know a little bit about or something close to it so that you can contribute. And once you get on one board, your reputation starts to take on a new meaning after that. Breaking through to the first board is the most difficult thing.
All right. I love this question. Hopefully, I think I knew what you're going to say, but what is your approach and advice about office politics and how to navigate it so it doesn't get in the way of executing what's in the best interest of the company?
I've always said, understand the politics, but don't play the politics. My experience, Shelley, and I'm sure you've also experienced this, when you get into the politics, people go, oh, Indra's so political. And they'll attribute statements to you that you don't even remember having said. So the best is understand the politics, stay out of it. Be an observer of the politics, don't play the politics inside the company. It's a tough one to do, very tough, but try your best.
And along those lines, I remember you were asked this, I think, at a Fortune Summit. And so I remember that answer. But speaking of that Fortune Summit, I love another comment you made at that summit. And maybe you could explain a little bit more. And I don't know if it comes from personal experience, but your other piece of advice to young women was put up your hand for tough assignments.
Absolutely.
No one will remember you for taking a successful business and maintaining it. Talk a little bit about that advice. I love that.
See, to me, you have to ask yourself, what's your proposition? What's your brand? What do you want to be noticed for? And I think people who want to climb corporate ladders of ambitions, don't forget this is a very steep pyramid. The corporate ladder is a very steep pyramid. And after about the second layer, there's a lot of attrition because, starts with 3,000 or 4,000 people, ultimately goes down to one CEO. So those are your odds. So you got to sit down and say, what is your proposition that will allow you to bubble up at least to the top? And so if you start to think about your proposition, how do you demonstrate your value to the company? To me, people notice when you take something that has been a difficult business, and then you turn it around and people go, wow, Shirley is awesome. But if it's a business that automatically has tailwinds and doing fine, people go, yeah, right, what is she doing? So I think if you put your hand up for the toughest assignments, and you may not always be successful, at least you gave it your best. and you learn a lot in the process.
Great. People are asking really good questions. I have
Yeah.
another one. They're going to take over my job next year. I'm not going to have a job. Anyways, being a woman of color in the business can be both a strength as well as a barrier at times. Would you share how you leveraged it as a strength, as well as how you worked to remove it as a barrier?
I don't know if I leveraged it as a strength because I had the immigrant fear. I had the fear of, how are people perceiving me being a colored woman from an emerging market. So I'm not sure it was a big advantage. I think that I used that fear to make me a better performer. It motivated me to do better and better and better. And that's how I think I powered through with competence, nothing else. And I think that especially women, as we try to make it in boardrooms, whatever, the game has to start with competence, just sheer competence. If you don't have competence as your calling card, then whatever else you market is temporary.
I love that. Competence as your calling card.
Absolutely. Your proposition has to be about competence.
It's a good T-shirt too, right? T-shirt slogan.
It's a great idea.
Anyway, we've got more questions. So tips for young people looking for opportunities to lead.
So don't wait for your company to give you opportunities to lead. Go to your community, go to NGOs, go to organizations who are looking for people to come in and take on leadership of some initiative or whatever. Do it, because ultimately what happens is when you go to a local community organization and lead something, everybody talks about it. And my belief is that when you're valuable on the outside, you're more valuable on the inside. So build your image that way.
Another question is, I'm interested in Indra's take on failure, rising from failure. Does she see resilience as a key part of success?
So you have to look at failure as learning moments, the teachable moment. If you look at failure as something that, oh my God, I failed, and then you just go into a deep tailspin, you might do that for an hour or so, but quickly recover and look back at the failure and say, what went wrong? And really analyze it deeply and put down what lessons you learned from it and make sure it doesn't happen again. Failure makes you tougher. Failure actually makes sure that you're more successful. People without failures, in fact, have a massive fall at some point in your life. So having failures along the way makes you a stronger person. But use it as a teachable moment.
So we have about a couple more minutes. And I think we've got at least one more question that we can go over. So this is actually good because your book is so much about balancing family and work and the tension. So this is a good last question. So what professional skills as CEO did you apply to achieve success in your role as mother and spouse?
As mother and spouse. I followed a very simple principle. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I used it in the proportion of 4 years and 1 mouth. I should double the number of years, reduce the amount of mouths. Because I think that the tendency immediately is to yell or to speak up. When I went home, I just said, okay, I'm going to listen more. I'm going to listen more, shut up and listen. Wasn't always easy, but you know what? I had to listen and act so much at work to come home and have an out-of-body experience by not reacting to everything, because moms tend to be punching bags.
Yeah.
And when you are working, you're a double punching bag. And so I had to come home and follow Epictetus, who said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth and use it in that proportion.
Yeah. So we are done with our Q&A portion, but Indra, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now and in retirement, and just tell us a little bit about your life now.
Besides serving on the boards of Amazon and Philips and Sloan Kettering and MIT, I also teach up at the Military Academy in West Point. And I'm really coming out of the book working to see how to work with all those organizations working on helping the country build a care infrastructure or push this debate on care infrastructure, trying to work with them to see how can we do some pilots in different states to really build out a care infrastructure and then sell that to the other states. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm going to give it my best and see what happens.
Great. So Indra, it was so nice to have this conversation with you. Incredibly inspiring, especially this week. And I'm going to hand this over to Amita Soni from the Boston Club, and she's going to do a wrap up.
Great. Charlie, thank you so much. You are wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amita Soni, co-chair of the Boston Club's Corporate Board Committee. Thank you, Indra and Shirley, for a fascinating discussion, and Indra for especially sharing your personal career journey and experiences in the book and with us here today. Today's chat highlighted for us that boards can play a significant role in ending bias and creating an inclusive environment. They can hire CEOs based on their ability and desire to get the best from a diverse task force. Our 2021 census of the top 100 Massachusetts companies showed today that their boards are increasingly including women and people of color. These diverse boards are going to accelerate the efforts to make companies inclusive and progress beyond onlys. We all know it, but it's worth reiterating that the diverse mix of voices certainly leads to better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everyone. And Indra has spoken about this so very eloquently in her book and today as well. But she's also talked about the value of paid leave in her career. As CEOs and boards think of the future of work, these conversations need to address better integration of work and family for both men and women as they raise their families, and with issues such as paid leave and leveraging technology to help in this regard. So it doesn't necessarily have to be what it was 10 years ago. We do need a better care system, or without it, especially in the middle of the pandemic, the 2 million people who have left the workforce aren't coming back. So in the club's corporate board committee, we help put more women on boards, on corporate boards, through advocacy, board education, and search. So whether you're a woman looking for a corporate board position or with a company who's looking to add board members, we are here for you. Do reach out to us and see how we can help you. Want to thank again our club members Tony Wolfman and Pat Flynn for their work on the 2021 census, and to the Corporate Salute Committee, our Executive Director Constance Armstrong, our sponsors, and a worldwide audience of almost 800 people for a fantastic event. We look forward to seeing you all at the 2022 Corporate Salute, and do stay on for some networking if you can. We'd love to have some more time with you. Thank you so much again, all of you, especially Shirley and Indra. Thank you.